Folks, this is not a drill. This is an emergency podcast. Why? The Pac-12 is expanding.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Oregon State, Washington State. And here's the announcement that Fresno State, Boise State, Colorado State, and San Diego State are going to be joining the Pac-12 by the year 2026. Now, Drake, when I tell you that news, does anything in particular stand out? Like, I don't know, basic addition?
Yeah, Spencer, like you said, Dylan Gabriel is a great quarterback. And I feel like this week for Oregon coming into a tough rivalry matchup on the road, it's going to be interesting at the very least.
Yeah.
Look, off the riff, that's it. In the middle of college football season, what we've got in the last couple of weeks with UConn and the Big 12 and now these four teams from the Mountain West and the Pac-12 is more expansion or realignment news. But that is the bulk of where college football is going, where the news cycle is going to continue to take us even in the middle of this season. Now, is this surprising? Not necessarily to me, because you're trying, if you're Washington State and Oregon State, to innovate with the conference that you still have kind of left. You would rather create than trust that there's a lifeline left with the ACC and the Big 12. And if you're the Big 12, I think you are still eyeing Oregon State and Washington State as two viable options, long-term expansion based on what they can bring you from a market standpoint, viewership standpoint.
Long-term is the operative phrase in there, because I agree with you, Drake. If the Big 12 were to ever expand again, how are Oregon State and Washington State not at the top of your list? And I think this is a good move for the Beavs and the Cougs. Now, they're going to have to get two more teams. We'll talk about who those could be for the second check. It's late at night, folks. Bear with me here for the second segment of this emergency reaction podcast. But I think it's a good move, because what you are trying to showcase is that you can play the best level of football that you can possibly demonstrate. And how do you do that? You bring in the best teams from the Mountain West, and you don't bring in the bottom of the conference like Hawaii or San Jose State or New Mexico or Nevada. You don't want to be in the same conference as those teams. You want to be in the same conference as the best teams that you can possibly find. That's what I've talked about all summer long and for the last couple of years as the Pac-12 has collapsed, but it's not collapsing, of course. They very much plan to be a league by 2026, which is when these moves will take place. So the Mountain West will exist. And by the way, don't cry too much for the Mountain West Conference yet, because they are certainly taking a major body blow here. I mean, it's tough to hang on, but they're going to be well compensated for their efforts. They'll get over $100 million in exit fees, perhaps paid out over a period of time. The Pac-12 will pay some of that with their war chest they got from the departing 10 schools. The institutions that are leaving the Mountain West, they're going to pay some of this, I would think, as well. But regardless, this announcement is expected to be official early Thursday morning. We're recording technically on early Thursday morning. Particularly where Drake is right now. But I think this move makes sense, and it's not the last one that's going to show up.
Well, I do love the fact that the Yahoo Sports article is quoted as saying the Pac-12's board must approve any memberships applications. Expected to do so
Tough
soon.
board to go through here.
Shoot,
One,
guys.
two.
Do we want to try to keep things alive or not? And what this does is sends another domino effect to teams outside of the Mountain West who would like to move up or move into that conference, because I do believe that league within itself will say, hey, how do we attack? How do we move forward in adding new schools to our league and expanding? What people have not talked about a lot, because it doesn't drive conversation of the ESPN level, the Fox, the CBS, or even our level, is the A10 or the Pac-Sun or the whatever, and how these smaller conferences are going to continue to grow and shift, whether that means you're bringing in a University of Central Arkansas or anybody from Kennesaw State, from the
Montana State, North Dakota State, South Dakota State come to mind to me as programs that if you're going to have them make the FCS to FBS jump, that's where I would start if that's the option the Mountain West ends up pursuing.
And if that's the option that those schools want to pursue as well. The only thing that I want to go back to here, and it's the reason that I do believe that Locked On Big 12 should be in this conversation, is Oregon State and Washington State have shown viability from a viewership standpoint. Oregon State brings in a lot of the Portland market. Washington State brings in a lot of the Seattle market and most of Idaho as well. Those two schools have better viewership numbers than I think a lot of people expect. Even Washington State was top 5 in the Pac-12 last season. The only Big 12 edition they were behind was Colorado, because Deion Sanders was Deion Sanders last year.
I do think that those numbers have to come with context, and we need to wait to see what their true television value might be after this season when they play 7 Mountain West teams, 4 Power 4 opponents, and an FCS school, compared to when they were playing the likes of Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA, Stanford, Cal. I think that will change a little bit. I don't think that they're invaluable television products, and certainly that's how the Mountain West schools have to see it. They wouldn't agree to this to this report. They wouldn't agree to change conferences here if they didn't think it was worth it. And what I've talked about before is the Pac-12 would have to sell Mountain West teams on, you're going to have better playoff access over here in this league than you would over in the Mountain West Conference over there. And this is going to start by 2026. The poaching of the Mountain West television partners could come into play as well, because if you're Fox and CBS and you want to have some West Coast football and you've had the Mountain West, where are you going to go in a league that is now headlined by Wyoming and New Mexico and San Jose State and Hawaii, or the league that's got Oregon State, Washington State, Boise State, San Diego, Colorado State, and Fresno? I don't think that that's even a discussion for anybody at Fox or CBS.
But it still doesn't scream extreme value. It doesn't scream the value of even the AAC if you're looking at the complete depth of a conference. And if I'm talking Washington State and Oregon State in their standpoint, it's a loss for them when compared to what the Pac-12 was.
Yes.
Certainly a loss from that. And what the Big 12 or the ACC could be. However, how do you ask those two schools to, hey, hold tight, maybe you have a spot in one of these two major conferences? You can't. They're supposed to attack here. However, if we're talking long term, I think the Big 12 could see value. The ACC could see value moving forward with these two schools as compared to a Wyoming versus Colorado State. Hey, Fort Collins is bigger, certainly, than Laramie, Wyoming, but competitively, who's going to be better and who would you rather build a conference around? I don't know. I'm not sure if you could exactly say, aside from maybe Boise State, that the other 3 schools in 10 years are going to be just as good as they are, or could keep the longevity of what they have, or that even Oregon State could keep its longevity in football success. There's where you run into a problem. How are we expanding, and does it make a lot of sense in a decade? I think even the Big 12 is asking that question right now with schools like Houston and Cincinnati.
Yeah, I think for Oregon State and Washington State, you look at San Diego State, Boise State, Fresno, I think those were the easiest no-brainer additions. Yeah. Like by and large, brand, market, football success. And by reports, that's what they're factoring in there, as they should. Football is the most important cog in the realignment wheels that churn and churn and churn even throughout the course of this season. And I think those were the easy additions. Colorado State, a fascinating one, because I could have seen them going with UNLV. I could have seen them going. Yeah. I don't think Wyoming would have been a top option there, but I think it probably came down to those two. We'll see what happens next, and there is going to be a next move. Don't forget, this gets them to 6 teams, and by 2026, July 1st, 2026, they've got to be at 8 teams minimum, or they cease to be a conference, which obviously isn't their plan. So what is the next step? Who do they add? Well, that's just a great conversation topic, so we're going to talk about it next. Before we talk expansion teams, let's talk about Ultimate College Football HC. Because guess what, Locked On College Football fans? I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game I think you're going to love. Ultimate College Football HC, an amazing game and simulation that lets you step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine being the head coach of your favorite team like Boise State, Fresno State, Colorado State, or San Diego State? Guess what? You can do that, and you recruit players, you oversee training camps, you hire your staff. Everything's in your hands. Plus, you do play calling as well. Everything you do will shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football HC, completely free, has no ads, 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. And of course, we have a special offer for Locked On College Football fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk, as it will get your team off to a strong start. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. This episode also brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is indeed Game Time. Yes, that Game Time there is something that's They got a new feature over at Game Time. It's called Game Time Picks. And guess what? It makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you are looking for. Get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy, and they have a lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. So who does the Pac-12 add? Because it can't stop at just 4 schools. I think there are a number of institutions in the running here, Drake, but what I think is happening here is Oregon State, Washington State look at San Diego State, Boise State, Fresno State, 3 clear-cut, top-tier Mountain West options that you add, no-brainer, easy decision right there. Colorado State probably comes into play with the fact that they've got more money than most people would probably think around that university and the football program, number one. And number 2, Fort Collins and Denver's television market was probably seen as more valuable than Las Vegas and UNLV. And I think that's a reasonable justification for wanting to add the Rams over the Rebels.
I think part of that also goes into how much you've won recently. And I go back to this a lot in expansion. I didn't believe 6 months ago that wins mattered that much. It was more the brand value. And what I've learned, and what we've all learned, is that brand value is directly equated to your recent win percentage. Clemson, a great example. 2009, they had less football revenue than Bowling Green. You would much rather have Miami in your conference than Clemson if it was 2009. Now in 2024, it's a no-brainer. Clemson is the school to go to. Why? Because they won consistently for 12, 14, 15 years. And if you do that, you're going to put yourself in a better situation. Is Las Vegas a better market overall than Fort Collins? It's possible. That argument's not that tough to make. However, UNLV just hasn't won the same way Colorado State has won. They haven't invested in football the same way that Colorado State has. So if you're looking at schools right now that the Pac-12 is vying for and trying to add to keep their conference alive, that's a conversation, is how much have you won recently? How much can you sustain amongst multiple head coaches? And even past that, could a Gonzaga be there? I mean, regionally, it makes a lot of sense. Could basketball be in play here? Could a UConn be on the table? Now,
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think they make a basketball-only move. I really don't. I think they have to keep the focus on football.
Then I'll pitch you this. If we're talking about these 4 Mountain West teams, right, coming to the Pac-12, to me, they would already announce the 6 that would move, because you need your 8. They would already say, hey, these are the 6 that we're interested in. Why are they only going 4? Who else is there outside of the Mountain West that we're possibly looking at? And it shouldn't be Gonzaga, because basketball only isn't going to push the needle here. You're right.
Yeah, so that's the next question that I want to get into here. And I think what Oregon State and Washington State are doing is something that I've talked about on this show, and I know you have as well for a long time. They're waiting to see what happens with the ACC, because these moves have to be made. They have to be finalized by July 1st, 2026.
Yep.
That's when pen has to be put to paper, ink has to be signed. Now, do the moves have to be announced before that? Of course, because logistically, there are a lot of things that have to take place when a school institutes a conference realignment move. Okay, there are a lot of things that take place behind the scenes. A lot of people don't think about. It needs at least several months.
Yeah.
But by early 2025, I suspect we'll have a better idea. But what Oregon State and Washington State are probably waiting for is, hey, if Florida State and Clemson leave the ACC and they go to the Big Ten, are Miami and NC State and North Carolina and Duke, are they going to get out? Because if anyone can break the grant of rights, will anybody break the grant of rights?
Yeah.
And I think they're waiting and thinking to themselves, we're trying to build the best West Coast conference possible. Who is around on the West Coast that would add to the brand value of our league, give us a good media market, who might have some inclination to be friends with us? Can you think of any such institutions, Drake, that could just, again, even if there's a 1% chance that Cal and Stanford could wind up crawling their way back into this rebuilt new look Pac-12, you have the opportunity and you have the time to take that chance. And if you're the Beavs and the Cougs, you absolutely do it.
To be clear, for those that are wondering, it's not Cal Irvine and UC Fullerton that Spencer is referencing here. It is Stanford.
It's UC Irvine, Cal State Fullerton, but you almost had it.
State Fullerton.
Yes.
What I want to do with the point you just made is kind of go back to the beginning of it, and that is the ACC falls apart. If that is the case, and you've talked about on your show, that's not that likely. We're not exactly looking at that being at least a given, right? That the ACC is going to fall apart.
No.
But Cal, Stanford, everybody's they're eyeing. Hey, if it does happen, where do we go? For Washington State and Oregon State, they're especially looking at if that happens, where do we fit in building the Pac-12 back? And maybe the first question they're asking is, where do we fit the new ACC? The ACC is going to want to backfill at that point. And if you're Washington State and Oregon State, you'd much rather join the ACC. You'd much rather join the Big 12 than try to rebuild the Pac-12. No.
Even a Florida State and Clemson-less ACC, yes, I agree. I don't think that offer, though, is imminent, or it would have shown up already. I don't think that the backfill for Clemson and Florida State is Oregon State, Washington State. I think the backfill at some level is Cal, Stanford, SMU. I think the ACC added those schools thinking, hey, maybe these teams will get out, or maybe we just wanted to make an expansion move. I mean, Cal and Stanford won a high priority for it.
You made the point that Miami and Duke and UNC, I mean, if these other schools are also on the chopping block, or I should say that the ACC is on the chopping block for those schools and they want to get out, then at that point, Washington State and Oregon State want to make a case that they could be added to that conference, or they could be added to the Big 12. Because again, it's much simpler to fall into the fold of one of these leagues that already has a TV contract or already has stability than to rebuild the Pac-12 yourself. Though I will say this, Spencer, on your point, if there are Washington State and Oregon State fans who say, yeah, we want to rebuild the Pac-12, we want to make this a venture, the Yahoo Sports article says, starting in 2026, the champion of rebuilt Pac-12 would presumably be eligible to receive an automatic bid. Do I believe that'll be the case? No, but Ross Dellinger writes
Whoa. Then auto bid? I'll be honest, I missed that in my perusing of the article because I've been caught up in all. Okay.
That's where I go to, if you are trying to make the case these two schools will rebuild the Pac-12, I think it's preposterous because joining the Big 12 of the ACC is much better. But if Ross Dellinger is right and they have an auto bid, then go for it. Rebuild it and add Stanford and Cal.
So I wonder if he's referring to an A5 or a P5 auto bid in that your conference champ is automatically in, or if he's saying your champion has a chance to be the highest ranked G5 conference champion and get into the college football playoff.
I mean, as it's written, it says, I'll read the paragraph in full. In the next 2 years, the Pac-12 champion is not eligible for an automatic qualifying spot as it does not meet the CFP's conference minimum requirement. However, starting in 2026, the champion of a rebuilt Pac-12 would presumably be eligible to receive an automatic bid. That changes everything.
I am. A lot of people know out there, I'm a Pac-12 guy, and I don't like what happened at the Pac-12, and I feel for Oregon State and Washington State. I have been consistent on this when talking about Liberty and this year's playoff. In no world should a rebuilt Pac-12 with Oregon State, Washington State, and a bunch of good G5 schools, in no world should that conference champ automatically be in. Have the consideration, yes. Would you make the case to some other potential schools that, hey, your best chance to get into the playoff is to be in this league because our conference champ has the best opportunity to be the highest ranked G5 champ? Yes, 100% you can be that. But to have the same auto berth as the Big 10, SEC, ACC, Big 12, I cannot see that being the case.
And we've already seen, Spencer, that there are contracts written where, we'll pay the Pac-12 X amount of dollars and they'll have a spot in the college football playoff and they have a grace period, and those just didn't equate to anything. I mean, I was talking 8 months ago on my show how it was written that the Pac-12, with their grace period, had a spot automatically in the college football playoff, and the committee met and said, you know what? Never mind. And there was no pushback because it was obvious. It was obvious where you're going to go.
It was just, I think it was a bargaining chip. Kirk Schultz holding up that vote was just him trying to get some other form of leverage out of the deal. And the committee members knew, you can't, that's not.
We can't do that. And the same thing here, even if it's Washington State, Oregon State, Cal, Stanford, and then backfilled with 6 Mountain West teams or 4 Mountain West teams and 2 of the wild cards, you still cannot give that an automatic spot.
I completely agree. Can I hold you for one more segment? Because you know what? Sleep is for the weak, quite frankly.
It is. Can we just to emphasize how breaking this news is and shocking it is, at the time of recording, it's 2:26 Eastern time, and I am still up because just wow, what we've gotten tonight.
Yeah, I'm 12:26. I will not be in bed for another maybe 2.5 hours because I've got a bunch of editing to do. But stick around because we're going to talk about what teams the Pac should go after for their next 2 or 4 or 8. Well, you're just going to have to stick here to find out which number we land on. First, a reminder, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. Why? Because it's America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you now through September 22nd. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is Google account and a valid form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. And if that's not enough, be sure to check out FanDuel's Profit Boost in the app and use it for FanDuel's Double Your Winnings for all of Sunday, September 15th. Pre-game moneyline bets. Profit Boost will be live starting Thursday, September 12th. View your account page to learn more about how you boost. And guess what? They have everything you want for college football. Point spreads, over-unders, money line, conference title odds, updated. They roll. It's just a fun place to poke around, so go if you haven't already. Visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel.com, that's where you go. FanDuel, official sportsbook sponsor here at the Locked On Network. All right, Drake, you have been randomly appointed a board member of the Pac-12 Board of Governors, and you get to have input on what 2 other schools minimum your conference is going after. Let's presume that nothing happens in the ACC, because if you could get Cal and Stanford back, you would take them. If you could get more schools from the ACC, you'd absolutely take them. If they'd be willing to go in that direction. You might have, holdovers like Boston College or Wake Forest, but hey, anything's possible at this point. Let's say that doesn't happen. It's just Florida State, Clemson that leave the ACC, and the Pac-12 is left to rebuild with whatever's left in college football. Who are you targeting?
Yeah, one of the points that I'll go with here before I get into specific schools is there is money left over for Washington State and Oregon State to operate with, and that's why they're looking at the Mountain West schools. But John Wilner reports to the Seattle Times the move will be devastating for schools like San Jose State, Hawaii, Utah State, Nevada, and others coming from the Mountain West. And what remains is part of a contract that has a $10 million per school clause for every team that leaves the Mountain West, the Pac-12. So the Mountain West saw this coming and said, hey,
it's a poaching fee is what it is.
If you want our schools, if that's the long term for the Pac-12, cool, come do it at a $10 million price tag so that we can rebuild. That price tag, Spencer, might be enough to convince New Mexico and Wyoming and Air Force to stay put in the Mountain West and try to let them put things together when you talk about, hey, long term, we, the Mountain West, can give you stability compared to this new up and coming Pac-12 that might not make it off the ground, doesn't have a TV deal, and you have no real technical stability. However, I do believe schools like Air Force or Wyoming, or you could dip down and find yourself in Las Vegas with UNLV, should be at the top of this list. Will that change if the ACC does in fact implode? Of course. Then you're calling Syracuse and Wake Forest and Boston College and saying, hey, you weren't profitable enough to make it to the Big Ten, the SEC, or the Big 12. If the ACC implodes, which I believe as of today, September 13th, that will not be the case. I do think the ACC will find
No, it's September 12th.
Shoot, I don't even know what day it is at this point. I haven't slept in 3 weeks. Expansion news keeps happening. I haven't slept in 3 weeks. If that is the case and Boston College picks up the phone, yeah, sure. Stanford, Cal, they pick up the phone. Yeah, sure. But then at that point, do you have the resources to build a conference that's coast to coast, but that niche? I struggle to say yes. Right now, I think it is more conducive for you to build a new Pac-12 with UNLV than it is Wake Forest.
I don't disagree, but let's go back to the question, Mr. Presidential or Miss Presidential nominee, and say the question I asked was, if you don't have Power 4 schools available, where are you going? See, you can't do the politician dodge on this show. I'm not going to let it happen.
Thank you. At that point, I'm definitely putting a call into the Air Force's Army, Air Force, give me a UNLV, Nevada. I mean, I'm going to go with some of those Mountain West schools, as you're already doing with these 4 that have been rumored to join the Pac-12. From there, your military schools.
You've got to call the American Conference schools at some point,
but
right?
There's just no way. There's zero way that's a thing. The American Conference schools would never jump ship to say
Worst thing they can do is say no.
Yeah, and they will.
Okay. Hear me out on this particular pitch. Would it be beneficial for the Pac-12 schools? Obviously.
Right.
It would be. Is leaving the American as difficult or as expensive as leaving the Mountain West? No. Historically, that has not been the case. The American has schools that exist in places like Texas, for instance, just to name a couple, UTSA and North Texas. Texas State is in the Sun Belt, I know. But if you're the Pac-12 and you have these 4 schools with Oregon State, Washington State, and you're at 6 total, how strong is your pitch? This is what it'll come down to try to convince UTSA or North Texas or Tulane to say, this is the league you should want to be a part of. If you join us with how strong you are, Tulane, with your brand, UTSA, then our conference champion is guaranteed to get that G5 spot 9 out of 10 years on a rolling basis.
Yeah, then if I'm Tulane, I say, hey, wait a second, check watch. We already have that. There is going to be
But see, here's the thing. The American Conference champion faces stiff competition at the moment. If you take the best from the American, Tulane, Memphis, USF, UTSA, and you put them in the Pac-12, how's the American Conference champ going to stack up? You're running out of teams. You're running out of schools. The biggest threat would probably be the Sun Belt.
But you're not.
Then,
the thing is, if you're Tulane and Memphis, you're saying, hey, we're going to stay the American, and our conference champion is still in a better spot than going to a conference that has Colorado State or even San Diego State. And
that's fair.
At that point, if the American stays true to what it is, and it should, Memphis is saying, okay, Pac-12, what TV deal do you have? And they say, well, we're trying to figure that out. We want to see who all is going to come here. That is not worth leaving the American Conference. What you're not going to see with, and it's tough to guarantee it today, but I want to guarantee the American teams will not pick up the phone and legitimately consider joining Washington State and Oregon State in an effort to join Colorado State in a rebuilt Pac-12 where they're already in a conference that feels like, Spencer, answer me this. If you're in a conference with Washington State, Oregon State, Boise State, San Diego State, Fresno State, Colorado State, a whole lot of states, is that an allure enough to try to rebuild that and leave a league that has the Tulanes and the USFs and the SMUs and the UTSAs? I don't think so.
The SMUs? Sorry, SMUs in what conference right now?
They let them out of the American?
Oh, yeah, they did.
No.
Did. Yeah, they just paid them a bunch of money and they left. They went to the Atlantic Coast Conference because, Dallas, and that makes all the sense in the world. I understand where you're coming from. The pitch is, hey, without you, we are comparable and we are going to fight for playoff spots. With you, it's going to be our champion because Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State, Oregon State, Washington State, Tulane, Memphis, UTSA. That conference champ is just so tough to beat because you're probably going to be 11-2.
We're in essence merging the Mountain West and the AAC, the best of the two conferences, into one singular conference and calling it the Pac-12. And it's not going to be the Pac-12 of old. And it's not going to get an automatic bid, though that was again alluded to by Ross Dellinger in his Yahoo Sports article. I just don't know if it's powerful enough to convince those schools to say, hey, we don't have pen to paper on a TV contract, but we could if you come here. I'm not doing that if I'm Memphis.
I understand that perspective. I still think if you're the Pac-12, you pick up the phone, say, what's the worst they can do? Say no.
Yeah, you try.
And then you go to your backup options, which would probably be, look, I don't know if you could get teams from the Sun Belt like Texas State, but I think having a foothold at Texas would be valuable. Or James Madison feels way too new to be playing in the Pac-12.
But they're good.
They are good, and they're committed. They got money.
To give you that, I do believe Sun Belt schools will be much more receptive to that call from Oregon State and Washington State, considering that those two brands are so much bigger than anything the Sun Belt has. The only thing I would want to touch on there with that, coast to coast is tough. It's going to be really tough to rebuild the Pac-12 and immediately make it James Madison from Virginia against Washington State from Washington.
That's true.
There are far less resources there.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree. There are obstacles, there are hurdles, but just when you thought we could talk about only football,
I think Dylan Gabriel's going to have some success against the secondary. I try to tell you.
I tell you what, I think Kansas State is going to run all over Arizona and win in Manhattan and prove the Wildcats of the Arizona variety are not Big 12 title contenders. Drake Toll, Locked On Big 12. Drake, that was fun, I think. I can't believe you're awake right now.
That was the most journalistic thing we've ever done together, and I don't know if I love it or hate it.
I don't either, but I hope you do. And if you do, like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, wherever you listen to or watch the show. Appreciate everyone listening. See you next time. That will be very, very soon, as in a show in your feed in the morning. Until then, have a wonderful rest of your day.